What does it mean to be a spiritually connected, spiritually integrated, and authentic leader? For as long as I can remember in my own life, it's always been drummed into me the importance of leadership. I happen to be the eldest child in the family, the eldest grandchild on my mom's side of the family of 16 grandchildren. In school, I found myself in student leadership positions, right? I was head prefect in primary school as well as in secondary school. And even in my involvement in church, I often got this message, it's important to be a leader and to be a good leader. What does it mean to be a good leader? To be considered responsible, have initiative, have leadership abilities to lead others. I think the concept of leadership comes from many different places, from cultural values of my family, from the cultural values from where I live, but also from things that I pick up, scriptural values, right? In church, we're told to lead like Jesus. And as I grew older and my responsibilities grew heavier, and I entered into full-time ministry, especially, I really wrestled, with what it meant to live that out in practical ways. It is one thing to read books about leadership and about what, the importance of, let's say, listening as a leader, of compassion, or, being able to relate to people, about managing people. We all know, I think, I'm pretty confident in saying that we all know that that doesn't necessarily help us feel like we are doing better as leaders. And sometimes we don't even know what it is exactly that we struggle with, or why is it that we struggle so hard with certain personalities or certain situations. We maybe don't really have an awareness of who we are, what our skills are, what maybe our shortcomings are, where our gifts are, and how to be more effective where we are placed with the limitations that we have. And then on top of all that, add on, what does it mean to be a good Christian leader, to be a disciple? Does it mean that we always have to, be so even-tempered that we never lose our cool, that we never have a sharp word, we never give a sharp word to anyone? Does it mean that we will always forgive when people, let's say, disrespect us, or maybe do we stand up when there's injustice for the people that are under our care, or do we also just take it because because we take discipleship of being like Christ to mean being meek? I mean, these are not questions that are abstract. They are questions that everyone who has been in a leadership position have had to face, right? And maybe have experienced failing at, because you choose one thing and then you feel like you fail in another area. One of the lowest points in my life when it comes to wrestling with leadership was at a point when I headed an office. It's not even a big office, and I just had a few people under my care. And I realized I couldn't cope. Every night I was praying and crying because I was so frustrated with wanting to form the people that I was leading, right? To mentor them, to help them to grow as young adults into greater maturity. But at the same time, wanting to be able to be professional and hold them to professional standards, because I also genuinely believed that was good training for them, and to meet certain deliverables, professional deliverables that are expected of me as the head of this office, in the church. And I found myself always bumping up against, being misunderstood, my words being misunderstood or misconstrued. I wanted the people that I was leading to feel to know that I cared for them, because that was the truth. I really, tried my best to do what was best for them, while keeping all these other tensions, under consideration. But it never seemed to be enough. It never seemed to be enough for them. It never seemed to be able to go anywhere, actually. And I have to say, at one point, I felt I failed spectacularly. And it was really bad. And then one day, in prayer, one of my usual, Lord, help me to be a good leader, help me to be a good boss. And I heard this come back, in prayer. I felt the Lord was saying to me, and stop trying so hard to be a good leader. You don't know how to be a good leader. It was one of those moments where you just felt like, wow, okay, ouch. What do you mean? I mean, I've been so invested my whole life in learning what it meant to be a good leader, right? And I assumed that would apply to being, head of an office, being a leader, being, a boss, so to speak. But I really didn't know how to. And I had to acknowledge the truth in that response I felt God was giving to me. Stop trying so hard to be a good leader, good boss. You don't know how to be one. And then the next thing was even more surprising. The next thing I felt like I heard in prayer was, I'm not expecting you to be a good boss, and that made me pause. And what are you asking of me, Lord? And he said, well, I'm asking you to be yourself and to follow me. Now, was God saying to me that it was not important to learn to be a good leader? I don't think so. But that exchange, pondering on that exchange, and subsequently continuing to wrestle with the reality of of being a leader, made me realize that I had kept my gaze fixed on, some kind of ideal about what it means to be a good leader. I wanted to succeed both in terms of impressing my boss, which was my parish priest, and in the people in the parish, with my accomplishments in the office. And at the same time, I wanted to be able to grow the young persons that were under my care. I wanted to make disciples of them, and I wanted them to like me. In my view, my perspective, my assumption. So it was not even fully conscious, but this was the operating assumption, right, that was driving me. That would what being successful and a good leader look like. Impressing everyone, including God, and also having everyone, happy with me, right? And I realized that the Lord was telling me, God was telling me, no, your eye is on the wrong, on the wrong place. Your gaze is fixed on the wrong place. I'm asking you to be true to the person that I created you to be, to acknowledge where you are, not try to be somebody that you're not, and to follow me as best you can, to deepen that relationship with God as best I can. And then the rest, the outcomes, how successful or unsuccessful I may look at this point, whether people are happy or unhappy with me at this point, for me being true to who I am, who He created me to be, that's not in my control, and I should not be trying to grasp those things. And I realized that was really difficult for me to do, right? Just following Christ, trying to be true to who He created me to be was really hard, because the bottom line was, I didn't really know who I was. My sense of self-worth was still very dependent on what people thought of me, whether people liked me. I couldn't help it. Even though I knew, and I really believed intellectually, cognitively, right, that my identity rested in Christ and God and who He said I was. And He loves me for me being me, not for anything I can accomplish. Doesn't matter how many times I've heard that, read that, even prayed to remember that. There's a distance between what I knew and what in my body, like what I was capable of living. And in that gap was such great tension And I often ended up just spinning my wheels because I didn't know how to live what I believe to be true. And closing that gap, I learned over time, over years, is what living that interior life is about ultimately. You know, it's what that journey into greater authenticity and integration and wholeness is about. It's learning the tools to meet ourselves where we're at, to know how to encounter God, let God encounter us where we're at, and not try to impress Him with, you know, how holy we are when we are not really there. How to then grow into the leaders that we're called to be. Not maybe the leaders that we want to be, or we aspire to be, or the leaders that we admire, but to discover and grow into, you know, the leaders that Christ calls us to be and God created us to be. And that's a long journey, right? That's a journey about, there's no shortcut to that journey. And the thing is, for as long as we don't realize that there's this interior journey to be made, that there's this need for integration, we won't be able to actually live out so-called Christ-like leadership, because there will always be something that we put on. It would be a persona that we try to perform. And I think if we're very honest, we will know when it falls short, when we fall short, and we know that we haven't become more spiritually fruitful. You know, spiritual fruitfulness is something that doesn't just happen in the short term. I think real spiritual fruitfulness shows itself over the course of years, and you see that the people that you had been in contact with, that you have led, whether they're your children, whether they're young people that you've been discipling, whether they're colleagues at work, you know, in all kind of contexts, or in your cell group, or people that you've had to look after and lead in ministry. If there's genuine, real spiritual fruitfulness, you'll see that that impact goes on in those people's lives long after you've maybe not been in contact with them even, right? And however long or short the contact time you have with these people that you lead, if there really is Christ, if you're really listening to how Christ is calling you, you can trust that something will grow. And there is an ease and a freedom with which we lead that we otherwise would not have if we felt that we had to control everything and we needed to succeed in specific ways and have everyone like us, for example, or have power over everyone. Now, these are the kinds of questions and issues that we explore in the course that I'm about to teach again this coming year in September into October, and it's called A Leader's Spirituality. And it's precisely looking at what does it mean to have these dimensions of eternity, of living this relationship with God that is eternal, right? And knowing that when He calls us to lead, there's also an eternal dimension to that leadership because it's in His kingdom. At the same time, it's very temporal. It's here right now, and there are all these limitations that we face in ourselves and in the situations that we are. What does it mean to lead with those two dimensions in mind? What does it mean to lead, being in touch with who we are right now, becoming more aware with what we struggle with emotionally, where our insecurities are? How can we become more aware when the actions that we take as leaders are more determined by our fears and our insecurities than our anchoredness and rootedness in our identity in Christ? And how can we grow into that identity that we have in God? What does it mean to do that? And how do we begin to do that to make it real and not just conceptually understand what that is? So in A Leader's Spirituality, I give some input on all these things, and there are exercises and facilitations to help you try and internalize all these concepts in the real practical issues that you are facing in your life right now. in your leadership context, right? And I just want to say, if you have been following my podcast, Becoming Me podcast, if you're interested in this whole journey about becoming more integrated and authentic as a disciple in Christ, then really please consider checking out this course. It is offered through the Catholic Leadership Center in Singapore. And if you're living in Singapore, and especially if you're a Catholic in Singapore, you can just register directly with the Catholic Leadership Center. If you're not residing in Singapore and you don't have a local bank account, for example, then there's an option for you to register through my website. Okay, so I will leave a link in the comments in the video below for YouTube, and you can find more information about leader spirituality on the website, about how it's run, how you can continue to have access, or you can access the sessions, the recordings, even if you can't attend it live. So this is an online course. There'll be live sessions, but if you're not able to attend them, you can watch the recording. You can also ask me questions offline, as in outside of those live sessions, which I will respond to, and it'll be recorded, and you can follow up and join, the discussion through the recordings afterwards. So I hope you check out A Leader's Spirituality. It is the only course currently that I am offering, and it has also proven to be a very systematic way to introduce some fundamental concepts about, beginning to integrate our life. I know that a lot of people have enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed this course and the questions that people bring. I love, hearing the nitty-gritty issues that we're facing, and exploring and sharing with people how to look at these things and begin to respond to our struggles, not just as a quick fix, but from the context of this ongoing integration journey, becoming a more mature disciple in Christ. So thank you for watching this video. I hope to see you in A Leader's Spirituality.